Huh. Hello. So I figured, well, it's really nice outside, so I took this time to film a video so that the lighting is nice, and no one else is home, so I can be upstairs in the main living area or whatever without people running around or kids fighting or all that fun stuff. Um, but I figure I should make a video about my gender. So that way, well, one, if you're curious, you can just watch the video. And two, that way when I get people asking me to explain things to them, I can just tell them to go watch this goddamn video instead of me having to explain everything a zillion times, because that gets old really fast. So I touched on it briefly in my very first video when I was just talking about CF, but then at the end I was kind of going through like basic things about me. So I'm trans. For those of you who don't know what that means, it means that your gender doesn't match up with the gender that people assign to you at birth, and yeah, that's what being trans is. And then on top of that, I am non-binary, which the term itself is a very vague term, but I'll get into what it means to me. But the term itself, from a very vague perspective, basically just means that you don't, or that somebody who is non-binary does not strictly identify with just being male or just being female. So for me specifically, I tend to fall basically in the middle of the two. If it's like male is here, female is here, I'm kind of in the middle. There's definitely certain aspects of me that are at least viewed as very feminine or viewed as very female, and there's aspects of me that are viewed as very masculine or viewed as very male. I know a lot of people in the world view me as either male or female, and I get that because that's the way that people are, but internally there's a lot of, or I don't want to say a lot, but there's ways that I feel like similar to a female or similar to a male, but I don't actually feel like I am one. And that's kind of hard to explain. Trying to think of an analogy. Like, I guess like certain ways that like I could be treated are like, oh, that makes me like, well, okay, so for example, if I'm in a relationship with somebody, I tend to play more of the feminine role, but that doesn't mean that I feel like a woman. I guess that's an example of that. So, or like right now, every article of clothing that I'm wearing, I'm pretty sure, is a boy's article of clothing, or how the world, determines male clothing, but that doesn't mean that I feel like a man. So, well, I'll start off 4 minutes into the video by saying my pronouns are they, them, and I think a lot of people hear that and they either don't know what it means, so they kind of just disregard it, or they hear it and they're like, okay, but they don't actually really know how to implement it into their language. And like sometimes I have to take a step back, because for me it comes very naturally now, but I remember there was a time where things like that didn't come naturally. and like I have enough trans friends to really prioritize pronouns. And of course, me, myself being trans, really means that pronouns are a priority for me to get them right. But I understand why, if I am someone's introduction to being trans, why that might not be their first thought. So pronouns is basically what you use to talk about people when you're not using their name. Or, yeah, I guess, yeah, if you're not using their name. So, a pronoun is like, or their title. So if the mailman comes, instead of saying, oh, the mailman came today and the mailman dropped off the mail, and then the mailman got back in the mailman's car, you would say, oh, the mailman came today, he dropped off the mail, and then he got back in his car. And you said he, because we're assuming that the mailman's pronouns are he, him. So the most common pronouns are he, him, and she, her. That's generally what most people in the world, well, who speak English, because, you know, it changes for different languages, but that's mostly what people use. But for me, and for a lot of other people that I know, they, them is also pronouns. They're actually very important pronouns to me. And to a lot of other people too, and I think it's really hard to speak up, because if I correct somebody and say my pronouns are they, them, it now opens this whole window or door or like whatever into a whole nother like universe that this person was not expecting. Like they were just trying to talk about me, and here I am giving them gender 101, and it becomes this whole, do I have the energy to explain it to them? Do I have the energy to deal with if they're not understanding or accepting of the information? Do I feel like arguing with somebody who tells me that I'm stupid for feeling this way or for using those pronouns? Kingston. Sorry, our dog was looking out the window and getting mad at like a cat or something. But it becomes this whole big thing. It's not just like, you know, if somebody pronounces my name wrong, I go, oh no, it's Bryn, most of the time. Sometimes I don't even feel like doing that. But for me, that's a lot easier. But when it's pronouns, and when I'm correcting them and telling them, oh no, it's this whole new additional information that you know nothing about, it just feels like a lot. So sometimes, a lot of the times I let it go. And I think a lot of people do that. A lot of trans people do that, even if they don't use they, them, you know, if there's someone who uses he, him pronouns, but when people see him, they gender him as female, like he might not have, like he might not want to correct them, because then it becomes this whole, oh, you're trans, or what do you mean you're not a boy, or like it just becomes this whole thing where you have to then fight to validate your identity, and it's tiring, it can be embarrassing, it's a lot of vulnerability, which I didn't realize for a while, but, you know, at least for me, it feels very vulnerable to be explaining my gender to people, because it's something that I've lived with my whole life, and it's something that I've thought about like my whole life. It's something that has been a deep, deep part of me, and like there's lots of pain associated with that, with growing up being forced in the wrong boxes. There's just so many different feelings that come with that, and I'm expected to share all those feelings with complete strangers, just so that they use my right pronouns, and that's kind of frustrating, but it's kind of just how it is. So yeah, so moving on, if somebody asked you to use they them pronouns, the way that you would do that, and yes, they them is a singular pronoun. I get tired of the BS where people are like, it's not grammatically correct, because it literally is. And you're just being stubborn, and it's hurtful, and it's rude, and it's just, honestly, it's just hurtful. But anyways, if someone was talking about me, instead of saying, Bryn is a hairdresser, Bryn did my hair, Bryn did the best job ever at doing my hair, this person would say, oh, Bryn is a hairdresser. They did my hair. They did the best job ever at doing my hair. And they might say, like, see right there, I'm talking about this imaginary person, and I said they, because you do it all the time. It's just you don't think about doing it. And once you have to focus on the fact that you're using they them pronouns for somebody, it can be, like, it can confuse your brain. And I get that. Like, it's not something that we think about a lot. I remember my first friend that I had that used they them pronouns, and I actually practiced. They live about 30 minutes away, and on the way home from meeting them, because I met them through a mutual friend, on the way home from meeting them, I just talked out loud about them, and just, I would say their name. Like, I don't want to say what their name is, but let's say it was John or something. I'd say, John is really cool. They are really cool. And, like, train my brain that this pronoun goes with this person. And it worked. Now, like, when I talk about them, I don't even really think about the pronouns. So it's, you know, I don't want to say it's hard, but it is something that you have to think about, possibly, if you're not used to it. But it is important. I'm not really a fan when people shrug it off like, oh, it doesn't really matter, because it does. It really, really, at least for me, and for a lot of trans people, I don't want to speak for everybody, but, I mean, pronouns really matter. So that's all about my pronouns. About my gender itself, I explained non-binary and sort of how I feel. Let's see, what else is there to say about it? I just feel very distanced from both genders, from those two genders. I don't want to say I've lived as both, but I don't like sharing my assigned sex at birth, because most people then make assumptions. Like, if I were to say that I was assigned male, people would then see me as a man. If I were to say I was assigned female, people would then see me as a woman. I have been on hormones for about a little over 2.5 years. I'm really happy with what they've done. They've balanced things out, almost to right where I want them to be. I do want to get a certain surgery, because I have dysphoria that does not go away just from hormones, but a lot of my dysphoria shrunk, and it was great, and it is great. I feel, when I look at my body, I don't like my body, but that's more because of the fact that I'm underweight because of my cystic fibrosis, rather than it is a gender thing. For the most part, I feel like my body is very balanced. That's a word that I like, and a word that feels like it fits me. it feels like I have equal parts, I guess, from both sides of the spectrum. And from strangers, I don't get gendered as they or them typically. Sometimes I do, and that's actually really cool. But for the most part, strangers seem to kind of grasp onto my identity, even if they don't use the right pronouns. They seem to interact with me the way that I want them to. It's kind of hard to explain, but people treat you different when you're a boy or when you're a girl or when you're in the middle. And a lot of people seem to be unsure when they interact with me, and that feels good for me. For some people it doesn't, but for me it does. I'm trying to think. I mean, I feel like that's most of my gender. Yeah, I guess I feel very balanced, and I want to continue to be balanced. I feel like my voice isn't too high or too deep. I feel like my body isn't too curvy or too stiff. I don't know if that's the right word, but you know what I mean. I feel like for the most part things fit the way that I feel that they should. And sometimes I do get frustrated because, like I said, I still have dysphoria over some parts of my body, but overall I feel good about it. I feel confident in the world. I just feel like me. And it's weird because for the longest time, I didn't even know that I didn't feel like me until I started seeing these changes, and I was like, oh, it's clicking now. So yeah, that's my gender. I don't know. I guess that's just about everything. I mean, I can always make another video sometime about, like my parents and my family and my friends' reactions, to me being trans, or something like that. I'll probably make a video like that sometime. Although I do want to say, although it sucks when you come out as trans and people don't love you anymore, it's actually, for me, it was a blessing, because it wasn't that they didn't love me anymore, it's that they never did. And the thought that I could have gone my whole life without ever knowing that they didn't really love me, that scares me more than the fact that they're not a part of my life anymore. So I'm really happy where I am with my gender and with the people who love me. So, yeah. Alrighty. All done. Have a nice day.